In this video, I'll show you how to do the more complex Pareto chart where you have the counts and then a cumulative percentage line. And so you start out the same way. You do need to have a list of the defects or problems and a count. And then remember we added these all up to get the sum total. And then we divided these numbers by the sum total to give us what percentage it was. And then we sorted these, and so you see the final result of these is that they're sorted in order from the highest percentage to the lowest percentage. And so if you need help with those, go back to the earlier video on Pareto charts. We need one additional component before we do the more complex Pareto charts. We need to know what the cumulative percentage is. Cumulative percentage is you need a starting point, and so we'll use, of course, our first percentage here. That becomes our starting point. We then add this percentage to that percentage, and that's our cumulative. And so it should, as we add each of these percentages, we should get up to 100%. And so we're simply taking the previous percentage and adding to that the new percentage. And so we were at 47, and then when we add the next defect, we're at 63 and on down. And so we can now copy this one. And of course, we should get to 100%. So here we're at 99.06, and then we add this small percentage here, and that brings us up to 100%. So we now have everything we need to do more complex. In the more complex Pareto chart, we actually use counts instead of frequencies. So we can actually display the actual counts. Of course, this list needs to be sorted from the highest to the lowest in regards to counts or percentages. And then you take the cumulative percentage. Because we can tell the percentage for each item if we just look at the cumulative percentage line, how much it goes up. So we don't use the percentages in the more complex one. We use the counts and then this cumulative percentage. And so once again, we can hit the control key or command in Apple. That allows us to highlight so they're not next to each other. We can highlight these and then hold down the command or control key and highlight another row. So we're going to take these three components, we're going to insert a chart, and so once again that brings up your menu. You could insert a column. In Apple this is a little tricky to actually play around with the data. I might have to convert the data to a line chart to get a hold of it, because what you see here is it's plotting the data against this one y-axis, and so it's using the counts. And so there's a 601 defects, and there's so many 212 defects here. You'll see that it is doing the cumulative percentage, but think about this in decimal format. These are less than 1. 100% is a 1 based on this scale. And so what you have to try to do is see if you can collect that data. Now it might be a little hard, so maybe the better way to do it now in a PC, it's sometimes a little easier to collect or connect on that data. You'll see that is selecting that data series. I want to select the other data series, which is proving a little bit more difficult here. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to change the chart type to a line, and it might be a little bit easier then to click on this, and there you go. What I can then do is, with this selected, probably the easiest bet is to convert this into give it its own axis. And so if you right click after you selected that data set and go to Format Data Series, and if you go under Axis here, you can actually tell it you want a secondary y-axis, and you'll see that it created a secondary axis. So the one set of data, the counts, is using this y-axis, and the other one is using that one, and so it can adjust in regards to percentages. And so we've given it its own. Now that's what we want that line to look like, but remember we want this back as a bar, so you would go back and click on it. So I've collected this data series, and then if I select column, it will format just that data series. So it is more complex in that you are creating two types of charts in one. You got a column chart and on this axis, and then you got a line on this axis. And so the key is being able to select those data series. So if this data series was selected, then I can tell it to use the main axis and then do it as a bar. If this data series is selected, then I can tell it to use a different charting style line and create a secondary axis. You do not need the key here because it's pretty straightforward. So we have a little bit more information here in the more complex one, but it basically does the same thing that the simple Pareto chart does. Shows us where the majority of our defects are and what that cumulative percentage is. And so we can look at this and say, oh, it's at 43%. If we add the second one, we go up to like 63%. You'll see that it starts off fairly dramatically and is kind of level. Some other Pareto charts is this will start down low, and each of these things, if they were more equal to each other, would be major jumps up. So the cumulative percentage adds a little bit extra dimension to our interpretation, at the same time telling us what the percentage differences is. If you can go from 47 to 63, you know there's a 16%. That's what this added to that in regards to cumulative. So we can figure out the percentages, but we also see how dramatic or how steep this line goes up. So if it starts out high and then jumps up even higher, that means that even though this was the highest one, this one also is pretty profound. This one tends to jump up very high and then kind of levels off and doesn't gain a lot. So a lot of these are equal to each other or such. And that's very clear in the evidence. 47, then it drops down to 16, 11, 11, then 7 and 5. And so it has that big initial point and then kind of drops off. It's kind of it doesn't rise up gradually as other ones. So there's a lot more sophistication. You can attempt to do the Pareto chart using the more complex, but the simplified version where you just have the frequencies in a bar chart is acceptable for your homework and the exams.